So guys and girls, as that's going on, let me give you another piece of dialogue that I think is really important at a listing presentation, and that is the handling of the price. The handling of the price. This, like, to me, Frank, people always, this is a $64 million question. Here's the problem, Frank. If you tell the owners a lot more than it's worth, you're being dishonest and you're actually listing an overpriced turkey. If you tell people exactly what you think it's worth, the problem that you're going to have, Frank, is that other agents are going to go in there and give them a lot of extra hope, and you'll probably miss out on the business. And if you tell them lower than it's worth, you have got bigger problems than listing presentations, right? There's a bigger issue there. So all I've got to say to you on price, listen to me very carefully. Tiptoe around the price issue. And I actually find the best way to handle price is this: Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, the value of your home is dependent on 4 factors: location, presentation, the agent you pick, and the strategy the agent uses. I've got good news. Out of the 4, you control 3. Location's fixed, but presentation, you can do that. The agent you pick, that's your choice, and the marketing that you get involved in is your choice. Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, I'd like to let you know, we could sit here for half an hour debating the price. We won't get it right. But what I will tell you is if we get the process right, the proceeds will come. And Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, what I'd like to do is to run through that process. Number 1, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, our job is to aim to get the best buyer, not the first buyer. Very important, because you are going to get other real estate agents that are going to come in and they're going to say, I've got lots of buyers. Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, I've got lots of buyers. I can bring this buyer through. I want you to understand, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, the game that we're in today is not about selling a property. It's about price maximization. And that can be 10% between an emotional buyer and what I call the probable buyer. And Frank, we're talking about big stakes here. Because like if you have a look at this, a $2 million property, a 10% deviation is $200,000. We can't muck around with this. So I've got to say to you, if you put things through the process, the proceeds will come. My problem at the moment with real estate agents, Frank, is the following. My problem is I've got agents that are saying to me, Tommy, but they're flying off the shelf. They're being sold in 48 hours, mate. We don't need to do any marketing. We don't need the social. We don't even have to put it on REA or Domain. They're flying. But it is the same agents that are saying to me, Tommy, no one's calling us in for appraisals. Is there anything that you think of that can get us back in the door? It's really simple. If you're not marketing real estate, not only aren't you marketing that property, you're becoming Australia's secret agent. No one knows about you. You might be racking up a few sales, but I've got to tell you, you're getting off the shopping list. And for me, Frank, I think we've got to accept that we're in the business of marketing. We're not in the business of anything else, right? You're a marketing-based agent. Sean, are you there?
I'll take that outside. Yeah, Tom, I am, but I can't seem to get the video working for some reason. It says that the video's on, but it's not coming up. Have you got anything your end?
Okay, let me see at my end what we can do, if there's anything. Susan?
You might just want to use another device.
Okay. Yep. I'll see if we can get
another.
Or,
you know where you, at the bottom right where it says start video, it selects the camera. Is it maybe it's just selecting another camera?
Right. Okay. Integrated webcam. No. No, it doesn't seem. I've got a bit of a face for radio, so I'm prepared to do it without facial.
Okay.
Are you on the phone, on a tablet?
No, we're on a laptop at the moment.
Why don't you dial in? Why don't you dial into the Zoom Zinc with your iPad or your iPhone? Because I reckon it'd be good. It'd be good to see you. Because in the meantime, what I'll do, Sean, is I'm going to continue with these scripts and dialogues that I think can sort of then move into the segue of you coming on. Why don't we do that?
Okay.
So it's the same link, Sean.
I have a question for you, Tom, actually.
Phone, use the phone, I've been told.
Tom, I got a question for you. So you had 3 questions there. The first one, was that something you would want to do prior to the listing presentation? Is that something you want to do on that phone call before you get there, when you're talking about what would a successful agent look like for them? Is that something you're doing on the phone, or is that something you want to do in the living room?
No, you do it in the living room.
Okay.
And you raise a very, very important issue, because Frank, when we were filming the Ultimate Real Estate presentation at your office on Friday with Ollie, one of the things that we were covering is that you shouldn't go into the guided tour once you get to the property.
Yeah.
And the reason I've got an aversion to going straight to the guided tour is that there he is, Sean's on. Beautiful. Okay.
Hello, Sean.
Connecting to audio, beautiful. So while Sean's coming on, let me answer that question. Frank, Here's the problem. If you go into a house, your average home can take 5 minutes to look at.
Yeah.
You can't build rapport in 5 minutes. But if you sit down first and you're having this Q&A and you're getting into a conversation, you can build rapport. And it's at this point in the presentation that you bring up the magic question, which is, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, I'm just curious, if you selected the perfect agent and things went brilliantly for you, what would that look like for you? It is during this time that you would answer. Was there another question you wanted to ask, Frank?
Oh, no, that's it. I was just on that one. I wanted to clarify as to when that was happening. So I guess when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, it was all about those pre-questions on the phone. So I just want to get a bit of clarity. That's perfect. Thank you.
And as we move on to Sean, let me tell you guys and girls, for me, the pre-list before you go to a meeting is more important than the meeting. Why? Because this is the time that you can diagnose before you prescribe. Now, the guy that's joining us, Sean Hughes, has got this ability to walk into listing presentations, and he's got eminence already in the market, right? I want you to understand that. This guy writes 3 million in GCI. He is in Western Australia, the number 2 agent. And he's only behind an agent that I've worked with for a long time, Vivian Yap. Haven't done any work with her in the last 2 years, but I'd worked with her from when she started in real estate. And I would say that she'd be the number 1 female agent in Australia, without a doubt. She writes big numbers. Off the top of my head, she'd be roughly about 4 to 5 million, wouldn't she? You got to unmute, by the way, Sean. There we go.
Yeah, I would have thought she'd be 4 or 5 mil this year, quite easily. Yeah.
Wow.
So, Sean, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, mate, how long have you been in real estate?
Mate, I've been in real estate 22 years now.
Okay. So the last time I was at your office doing some training was about 4 or 5 years ago. It was a Realmark office, and it was nice. Yeah, you're still with the brand?
Yeah. Yep, we are. Yep.
Okay. And can I ask you, you in the business, you run your own effective business unit, and you write around 3 million in fees?
Yeah, this year will be our best year that we've ever had, and we'll do over 3 million this year in fees.
Okay.
That's
Brilliant.
huge.
Unbelievable. Now, next question I want to ask you is the listing presentations you go to, right? You've heard me use the term attraction agent. It's not who you know, it's who knows you.
Yes.
I presume you fall into the attraction agent category.
Yeah, definitely. Not on everything. Some things you certainly got to duke it out with everyone, and it's a bit of open warfare, particularly in the market here in the West, Tom, at the moment. There's a shortage of stock, and it's a pretty competitive market. It always is the case when we're in this cycle. There's pressure on fees, etc. So I think that we work hard in fishing upstream with our clients so that we're dealing with people who we've got a long-standing relationship with, and that's quite easy business to win. But definitely not everything is an attraction agent listing where people have made the decision to go with you before you turn up, and not everything is a past client that you've dealt with for 10 years and it's a second time round and they're just going to go with you. There is a fair bit of still open warfare, I suppose, and in those opportunities where you're going up against 3 or 4 agents in a highly competitive marketplace, I think you need to still make absolutely every post a winner, and that includes, just like you were saying, a pre-listing kit, whether that's via electronic or something that gets delivered out. You know, there's a lot of agents in Western Australia that still don't use pre-listing kits, and I think it's a great opportunity not only for you to diagnose exactly what their needs are, like you mentioned before, but it's also an ability to basically introduce yourself, because if you're dealing with a cold relationship where you might not have met or had dealings with them before, technically you need to really create a relationship in a short period of time, so that you've got trust and things like that. And the more touch points that you have not only makes you obviously look professional, but it gives you the opportunity to build rapport. So at least when you turn up to the proper appraisal, you've met them, you know, digitally or physically before you turn up and you see them for the first time.
Sean, I want to touch on this, because when I put listings in 2 buckets. Ones that you've got rapport and a pre-existing relationship, they're warmer, and we prefer those because you said there's trust in that relationship. And some agents tell me, Tom, it's not like a real listing presentation. It's like a bit of a chat, to be honest with you. It's like it's this conversation that flows, and it's not like you're trying to prove yourself, right? It's you're updating them, and there's this assumption that they're going with you. I want to touch on the catch and kills. The catch and kills are, they don't really have a relationship, and you know that they've called 3 or 4 others out, right?
Yeah. What
would you say percentage of your business is catch and kills versus pre-existing relationships?
Probably 30-40% would be catch and kill.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
So still a fair percentage.
Okay. Now, can I ask you, to the audience that's watching this, the catch and kills, any tips that you can give them that improve your chances of winning a catch and kill?
I would say you got to know what their hot buttons are. You know, you really need to know what's important to them. And honestly, you know, I think new agents in the industry are really good at asking questions. Experienced agents tend to have a bit of knowledge explosion, and they get in there and they tend to talk at people rather than ask questions and listen, because ultimately you are the doctor. But in order to prescribe, you need to know what their ailment is. Really, it's not just you're there for a price and you talk about your product knowledge. So I really feel as though that the question-based opportunity, either that's at the pre-listing opportunity, or whether you're in the appraisal and you're asking those questions, in order to diagnose, you've got to know what the issues are.
Do you generally what's your average price point?
Our average sale price is 1.2.
So, Sean, do you with the catch and kills, have you noticed a pattern? Is it 2 meetings before you sign it up?
Always 2 meetings. You know, we would very seldomly do it in one meeting. It's always the opportunity to meet and greet and understand the property and their needs, and then come back with your findings effectively. And that just gives you the opportunity. I know that it takes more time, but I think if they're a catch and kill client, it's worth your time to do it. It's probably a $30,000 or $40,000 pay opportunity, and so therefore going back twice is a good thing.
Okay, in a moment, Frank, I'm going to bring you in to ask a couple of questions that might be coming through your mind. But in the meantime, I just want to ask you, on the first meeting, would you touch on commission and the cost of advertising, or is that something that's not really discussed?
Is that one for me?
That's you, Sean.
Yeah. I would always touch on that, to just say that it's something that we would address. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the things that I'm going to cover off today are going to be price and what you can expect to get for your property. We're going to discuss fee. We're going to discuss strategy.
Do you talk about that on the first meeting? Do you talk about that on the first meeting or the second?
I address it at the first meeting to say that when we come back that we will go through it. So, today's about seeing the property. Today's about getting an understanding of what's important to you. Then we'll go away and we'll fine tune all of our research, and we'll come back to you with a proposal. And that proposal will cover off on things like fees. We'll cover off on marketing, pricing, strategy, etc. So then usually when we come back and present, we'll go through, reiterate that at the start again and say that, guys, we're going to discuss these things today. Aside from those things, are there any other things that are important to you? And what are you looking to achieve off today's meeting? Is it obviously it's a price? Did you have any preferences in regards to strategy? At least I can flush out then, are they adverse to auction? Are they adverse to marketing? Do they want to go off market? Do they want to go on market? And then I can basically tailor our bespoke presentation. My presentation, Tom, isn't very rigid in regards to I turn the page and I go through this, and then I turn the page and then I talk about that. It tends to flow with a bit of a discussion, but that's always based around the feeling that I'm getting from them and what's important. Like, I'm not going to go straight into an auction presentation if it's an elderly couple and they're talking about off market to me. So, but when we're in that presentation and we do get to the marketing, we discuss things like marketing ranges these days will range between $2,000 and $10,000, depending on where you'd like to see it advertised. And it's a bespoke scenario where we'll tailor something based around your budget that you're working with. And then fees, very much the same as well. If sometimes when we present, we're not the last agent going in. And if we're not the last agent, I will never give anyone a fixed fee. I will say that,
smart man. I got to tell you, I can't tell you the amount of business, Sean, that is lost because the last agent comes around and cuts a deal with them, right?
Well, what do I need to do to get the business today? If you're going up against a sharp agent who's last, that's what they would be saying. And 9 times out of 10, even if you were the better agent that was in there earlier and they liked you more, that guy's there. They've got all of the information to cut a deal, and that person is going to cut a deal at that point. They just say, what does it need to be to do the business now? So
as a closer, guys and girls, you're watching a closer. That's why he's got a $2,000 jacket with a pocket square, and I'm wearing a $150 jacket without a pocket square. This guy is a closer.
And that's why I'm wearing a T-shirt.
and Frank's wearing a T-shirt, right? A real base T-shirt. Is it a real base? By the way, Frank, the team was so good. They gave me 4 or 5 T-shirts when I was there. And that's great. I got 3 black and 2 white. They're about $10 each. This is the man that we got to dress like. Yeah. You know what? By the way, he's actually bringing it up. Sean, you know how many times real estate agents say to me, "Oh, Tommy, mate, I rang him up 2 weeks later. I missed out on the business. They basically said they gave it to the other agent. I think the other agent must have dropped his pants. He's done it for nothing." But the truth is, it wasn't that. They never got into the conversation. What has to happen for us to do a deal here, right? You're not going to do it unless you have a conversation with them face to face, much preferably.
Yeah, and I think people will like to get an understanding of fees, so it's not like there's a big great myth of I'm not going to tell you what my fees are. But I think if it's generic enough to say fees these days range between 2% and 3% depending on the caliber of the agent, guys, what I want you to do is make a decision based on who's got the best strategy to get you across the line and get you the result that you wanted in the time frame you're looking for. And if I'm your agent for that, then you and I will see eye to eye on fees, something that you're comfortable with and I'm comfortable with. But I can tell you right now, we'll see eye to eye on a fee that's fair for everyone. And it just tells people that you're fair, you're reasonable. Fees have got ranges. It's all negotiable, but there's no point negotiating on fees with an agent that you don't want to use. Pick the agent first. So if I'm their guy, I'm back in the room, I've left the door open to have a discussion on fees. So even if someone else goes in after me and says, I'll do it for this, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to get a phone call back saying, oh, well, Joe Bloggs is going to do it for this. We'd really like to use you. What can you do?
Yeah, Sean, I've got a client called Shane Brocklebank in Wellington. He writes around 2.5 million, writes a little bit under you, but he says whenever he's cornered by a vendor and he's not last in, and the vendor says, but tell me, roughly what are you going to charge? he doesn't want to fall into that game. So this is what he says. He says, listen, all I can say to you is I've now met you and I've actually seen your property, and it's going to be a privilege to work with you. So I'm not going to let fee get in the way. I want you to pick the best. I want you to pick the best agent, and I'll work with a fee that you propose. And what happens, he often says, when they call him back and they propose a fee, it is a better fee than his walk-away position would have been had he pitched a fee. So you can really stuff the game up for vendors that have got that Excel sheet wanting to write down each person's fee. If you turn around and say, I'll work with you, your fee, you propose a fee, right?
Yeah. Well, the whole idea is to have enough of your pipeline business so that you don't have to deal with those spreadsheet people. God, I hate them.
Yeah. No, look, sometimes I notice a lot of those when I was listing and selling real estate, they were often school teachers for some reason, you know, the school teacher. Frank, can I hand over to you to ask anything you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, and mine, I guess, is almost prior to that first meeting, right, Sean? It's what are the questions that you'd be asking on the phone that's helping prime you for that pre-list, or is there not that much that you're doing on the phone prior to getting into the living room?
I've actually got a lady that handles a lot of our buyer inquiry. Well, she handles all of our buyer inquiry inside our team at the moment, and she's extremely good, Frank, from a build rapport over the phone scenario. And the reason why she does that is because she's female, she cares, she's empathetic, and it's very much about not so much what they're looking to buy, but trying to get an understanding of what they're looking for. And so she spends probably 15 minutes on the phone trying to get an understanding of where their kids are going to school, what their budget, what they've seen, what they're looking for. And so I think what I find is that we get so much appraisal work off the back of that, because most agents like myself are usually pretty shit at handling buyer inquiry from currently in a market where there's so many buyers. You know, in WA, you shake a tree and 100 buyers fall out. So I think it's almost like when you're doing turnover and volume, it's like, are you going to buy this property? Or, you know, and if you're not, just like, you know, next and move on. So the appraisal rate that we get off that is very, very high due to the fact that basically she's doing a lot more work at the front end. But yes, certainly when we go to those appointments and the lead up to those appointments, you know, I want to know, you know, what's important to them, what they're looking for. I want to know their hot buttons, how long they've been for, as much information as you can, so you're set up to have a bit of a win. Some of the guys use a questionnaire in their email, so they might send out as part of a pre-appraisal kit. They'll send out an email with information on them, which I suppose is the benefit and the chance for them to do their bragging, if you will. You know, here's a video of me at an auction. Here's my recent sales. Here's me in the area. Here's my stats and everything. It's the bit of the brag ad, which builds credibility around them as the agent specialist. But off the back of that, they'll have a questionnaire, which is pretty simple. You know, it's got a whole heap of questions in regards to them and their property, so that when the percentage that we get filled in of that is really quite high, which is fantastic. Basically, it's not even fair. You're turning up to an appraisal that, you know, you've had someone who's built amazing rapport whereby they actually think that these people care about them from a buying point of view rather than them just being a number. Then they've got a whole heap of information about us, but then they've filled in their questionnaire of what's important to them. So you turn up and you know a lot of that information already. I just think you set yourself up for a much better appraisal presentation with all that preemptive stuff.
Yeah, love it. Nice one. And the last question I have before I'll hand back to you, Tom, is is there a standard amount of time that you would spend in that pre-list appraisal first meeting? Is there like usually a rough amount of time that you're spending there, or are you trying to spend, like Tommy Hector said the other day to us, Tom, was as much time as he can get with them to build as much rapport, So is there what's your approach in that?
Yeah, well, look, I think listings, again, are pretty low on the deck at the moment. So the most important dollar productive time that you can spend as an agent is in front of a potential seller. And whether that's a potential seller now or whether that's a potential seller in 6 years' time, that's the most dollar productive time. So we don't have a specific time on that. With buyer inquiry being much more than it has been, certainly I'd be limiting some of that. But if your buyer is going to be your next seller, and in the market that we're in at the moment, there's a lot of people who are locked in where they are a potential seller, but not until they find something. They can't find something. So the additional time that you can spend with them can sometimes be with them as a buyer, and that firms you up for the listing, even if they don't buy through you.
Yeah. Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Now, Sean, I know that we've got this scheduled for a 30-minute. We started a tad late. We might aim to finish in around 5 minutes, because that sort of does that work with you, Frank?
Yeah, all the time you guys need.
Okay, so Sean, I'm just going to ask you, like, I've known you for a while, and I can tell, even though I'm not physically there with you, you've still got the look in your eye and the appetite to do real estate. I find that becomes problematic with people the longer they stay in the business. In fact, I can turn around and say, I was talking about it with John McGrath the other day, there's only a handful of people that I can say were cracking real estate 20 years ago, right? That you can say, oh, they're still doing it now. It appears to have this life cycle, whether people get burnt out or whether people just move on. Are you still, am I right? It appears that you're still hungry, you're still pumped about it.
Yeah. Well, this year will be our best year that I've ever had. So, we've had good years at 1.8 and 2 mil and stuff like that before, but, to do another third on top of that this year is probably evident of that. I think, you talk about burnout, and I think that's a really big thing. If I could pass comment on what I see with a lot of my guys in my team at the moment, is because of COVID and the fact that we can't get away, a lot of the listing presentation, I think, is about energy. Yep, there's scripts and dialogues, and yep, there's the way that you propose, but it's a bit of a transfer of energy. And I see a lot of agents in general at the moment across WA being low on energy because they haven't recharged. They can't. The best travel for them is overseas travel, because they divert their phone and they actually recharge. And because none of that's happening, they might have a little week off here and there. They're not actually recharging. And on top of that, a lot of them are pedaling a hell of a lot harder than they ever had. So you've got twice the workload with half as much holidays. And, I think agents in general, the commission-based industry, we always have the feeling that the tap's going to turn off. I even run around in scarcity in the back of my mind. We just come off $3 million, but in the back of my mind, I'm still hunting hard for listings, because I just think the end of the day, the tap can turn off, and it sort of perpetually keeps you on the wheel, and you don't realise that whole back of your mind, I've got to continue to push hard. It's quite draining. So I think the big thing with not having holidays is the fact that there is a fair bit of burnout out in there, and everyone's making great money, but, we really need to work on recharging at the moment.
So, Sean, what you said, I think, is very pertinent, because there's a lot of girl or guys that think, hey, I can't be like him. They're self-confident, they believe in themselves, they're unbreakable. But I remember interviewing Barbara Corcoran at ARIC 2 years ago, and she had $10 million agents in New York that would report into her. And she would say, I said to her, what's the common denominator? She goes, they're nut jobs. I said, they're nut jobs. She goes, they come in on the 1st of January each year, and they say, Barbara, I reckon I fluked it last year. I can't do it again. And she'd say to them, you've been writing $10 million. You've done it for year after year. Why don't you think you're going to do it? I think we do have a voice inside of our head saying, the tap's going to turn off, right? Or I was lucky, or things aren't going to go this way. And I don't know whether it's a healthy way to be successful, to have aversion of fear, but I do know a lot of successful people that succeed, including one of the highest paid comedians in the world, Sebastian Maniscalco, was interviewed by Joe Rogan, and he said, Joe Rogan says, what drives you? And he says, I've just got this fear that I'm going to end up becoming irrelevant and hopeless and no one's going to want to hire me. So what happens is I've got this insecurity that I just keep reinventing, keep pushing harder, you know. And it's funny when you say that, but listen, you're a breath of fresh air. Life's changing for you. Like another client I coach, Shane Beaumont, who's had a baby. I think you were flatmates too, weren't you? Yeah, mate. Life's changing for you because you've got a baby coming. What months are due?
Mate, this month, the 22nd, so 10 days.
Wow, it's exciting.
Well, we'll catch up with you in 12 months' time, and Frank and I will do a session on sleep deprivation and real estate. And, we'll just touch on and see how you've managed that. But it's an absolute pleasure. I want to let everyone know, sorry for the tech hiccups at the start. I still think the content that you delivered there is absolutely gold. We've got a recording of this session. Frank, I want to thank you again. This has been brought to you by Real Hub, Real Base. Anyone that want to hit up Frank, what's the URL if they want to find out about the pre-lists?
realhub.com.au/proposals.
Guys and girls, signing off. Sean, thank you so much, mate. By the way, someone asked here one of the questions. You and your team members, you're doing mainly listing and selling. Who you got a few other who does what in the team?
So I've got Oliver, who does listing and selling the same as myself. I've got Jenny, and she's on 3 days a week at the moment. And then I've got a full-time PA, Karis. And then I've got a part-time lady, Juliana, who does a lot of the buyer after-sales settlement and all of the buyer inquiry.
As they say, the pilot doesn't serve drinks on the plane, right? Very important. You've got to make sure you've got a group of people around you. That means that you can stay focused on the main thing. What's the main thing? Get listings. Guys and girls, signing off. Those on Facebook, share the video.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers,
See you.
guys.